Welcome back to the Hardware Unboxed podcast for episode 94. Now, you might have guessed what we're going to be talking about in this podcast, and you would be 100% correct. We're going to be talking about Nvidia significantly reducing supply of the RTX 5070 Ti, Asus claiming to put it into end-of-life status, then reversing that claim later. We'll be talking about all of the things that have happened, all the things we've heard, the timeline, our thoughts on some of the reaction, and all of that in this episode, plus a bit of discussion on AI as well. So if you love AI, maybe tune off later in the episode. So let's get into it. Okay, Steve, I was wrong. I was 100% wrong about one of the recent videos that I made on the channel. The 9850 X3D price is something that I thought would be a lot higher, and it's just been announced this morning as we're recording this episode for $500. So the MSRP of the 9800 X3D was $480, so they're making it just $20 cheaper. Now, I said in my video, which was, again, quite wrong now, that I was expecting AMD to milk customers and pull an Intel by making this a KS CPU sort of product, making it $100 more expensive or something like that. But they've come out and they've made it apparently just $20 more, assuming that you can buy it at that price when it launches. But that seems reasonable.
What did I say? Do you know?
We discussed it on the podcast a while back. I think you might have said $500 was unrealistic, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I can't remember because more recently I've thought minimum of $500 would be the price. I was probably expecting more like $550. I don't know if 600, but I can't remember what we discussed. So I won't say what I did think or did say because I actually don't recall. We'd have to go back and look at that. I didn't know we were talking about that. If Tim actually made some notes for this episode, I might have gone back and looked at that. So the lack of information here can be blamed entirely on Tim. So you've stuffed up this segment already twice now, Tim. Good start.
Yep, I guess I have. So yeah, 9850 X3D. Apparently, it's also coming out like next week, I believe. So
well, I'm not
January
allowed to comment
29th.
Because apparently that's how the AMD NDA is now. I can't confirm whether I have or haven't signed an NDA. I can't confirm whether I do or don't have a sample. I can't. My hands are tied on this one. So maybe, Tim, you'll have to do all the talking because you didn't sign the NDA and I haven't briefed you.
Well, good news because they've officially announced that it will be on sale on January 29th for $500.
Okay, good.
So yeah, at CES they announced all the specs and stuff. So 5.6 gigahertz boost frequency, 4.7 gigahertz base, the usual cache, TDP, core count, everything. I think it's like 400 megahertz higher clock than the 9800 X3D, and AMD is expecting somewhere around 3% higher performance. So I know that I saw some reports back when it was announced that they claimed 7%. I think they claimed up to 7% with an average of around 3%. So it should be basically the same processor.
Yeah. So they announced that 8 hours ago. It's relatively early in the morning. So Tim's onto the news. I've woken up and basically got to the podcast PC. So I didn't actually know that they'd even announced that overnight yet. I was probably going to learn that in about an hour from now, but I learned it an hour sooner. So yeah, obviously, I can confirm that information. So reviews usually go live like a day beforehand. I guess as far as news goes this year, Tim, and product releases go this year, we can say this is very exciting.
Very exciting. Yeah, maybe even relative to some of the stuff this year, I don't know whether it will reach that level, but certainly there will be a review and you'll be able to see how it goes. I mean, I think it'll be quite interesting to see how well it sells, because if it is, maybe 5% more for 5% more performance, then you'd expect it to overtake the 9800 X3D in most sales. So what that would do to the 9800 X3D, I'm not sure. But then we were just looking at pricing for that part, the older existing part, just before we started this podcast. And it has been $480 most of the time. It's sort of dipped down to $450 or even $440, $430-ish for very brief moments at times. But for the most part, it's been pretty close to $480. It hasn't received massive discounts. So, I mean, maybe in terms of real-world pricing, it'll be maybe $40 more. Not 100% sure, but again, the pricing could change after the release of the new part and become a bit cheaper. So who knows? Who knows what will happen, but you'll see some performance benchmarks of that processor pretty soon. And I think most people will probably be able to guess what that's going to look like just based on what AMD has said.
Well, for $20 more, you've got to wonder why they're bothering. It seems like a bit of a pointless exercise if the exercise is to make more money. I mean, it does make more money, but it's $20 more. And, how many of them can they produce, that sort of stuff? Probably the goal is more of like the Super Series, a mid-cycle refresh to get people excited again, encourage people who have been sort of thinking about buying one to go and buy one, because now it's a little bit better. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's probably a little bit better. So I think that's more, get in the news cycle, get in the headlines again, drop a bit of excitement, bit of enthusiasm and get people buying them. I think maybe that's more what it's about. But either way, yeah, probably not going to be the most exciting launch. But as I said, there's not much else happening this year. So for at least the first half of the year, I don't know what else really is going to compete with that.
It's a product that you might actually be able to purchase, unlike the next topic, the RTX 5070 Ti.
Ooh,
so,
Tim, you're going there straight away.
Yeah, so I mean, we published a video last week.
You published a video.
Sure, yes. I published a video based on conversations that you had. So I'm not letting you get away with any throwing under the bus here.
I'm throwing you under the bus big time. So this will be my last podcast with Tim. We've had internal discussion. I think it's best that I let Tim go. We move on.
Well, I don't think anything in that report is inaccurate. So I mean,
no, I'm joking.
So yeah, I mean, I've obviously made the video, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts and your sort of summary of what happened from your perspective with that report, where things are at right now, and yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, some of it will be summarizing what you've already said or what people know, but I guess I'll start from the start. So we were approaching CES. I'm sort of thinking, what content are we going to be doing over the next few months? I have probably a list of about 20 ideas, which will get us through a few months. And I was going over the content we had done and the Radeon RX 9070 XT roundup. That was still very popular content, was doing well. Obviously, leading up to Christmas, GPUs were at MSRP, and we were sort of saying, if you want one, buy now, because all information we have is that prices are going up. So yeah, roundups do well. The motherboard roundups, the GPU roundups, and since we were expecting the supercards at CES, so we're partners by the sounds of it, it didn't happen. I thought, you know what? People wanted a 5070 Ti roundup, and I didn't really bother doing it because by the time we sort of got around to doing it and they were available, we heard that they were going to become unavailable, at least at a good price, and it was late in the cycle or expecting the Super Series. Why invest a tremendous amount of time and effort to round up products that probably aren't going to be around for much longer, and more importantly, you guys aren't going to be interested in buying them? So the goal was wait for the 5070 Ti Super to arrive and straight away jump into a roundup and do that. And then I've got the sort of AG Force roundup done. That's where we're at. It became quite evident by CES that the Super Series had been delayed or possibly cancelled, depending on how things play out. So let's go back, change plans, do a roundup of the 5070 Ti series. Now, I only have like a couple of 5070 Ti's. I think maybe one of them ended up with you, not sure, but I've got a couple of them that we got originally. I think maybe I got 3 originally. The goal is probably to look at 2 dozen cards, an actual roundup. And yeah, we'll buy a couple of cards if we have to fill in some gaps, but generally, rather than spend, $30,000, $40,000 acquiring cards, usually the partners, fall head over heels to get these cards or motherboards, whatever they're submitted, because it's free product placement for them. We don't charge for this, obviously. We're just like, send us a sample and we'll test it and include it and do a detailed report for you and for people interested. So having made that decision, I started putting out feelers to every single one of NVIDIA's board partners, requesting samples, basically. We'd like to test all of them. We're willing to put in the time and effort to test all of them. And we'd like to provide the viewers with the most complete roundup possible. So sent all those emails out to partners. And normally I get responses very quickly because, as I said, this is very cheap exposure for them. We don't charge for it. They send the sample, they get all the beautiful B-roll. We usually provide affiliate links and things to buy them and stuff like that. So it's a big win. And as people are familiar with the content, like there's an effect that's well known in our Discord server where if Tim, for example, gives a monitor a good review. You just can't buy it for a while. And we've seen the same thing with motherboards. Like if we recommend a motherboard as being, head and shoulders above the others, or something, it's particularly good at something. Think the B650 HDV from ASRock. It pretty much outsold all their other boards because we recommended it. So companies have sort of cottoned onto this. They know now. So if we ask for a product, just letting you guys know what normally happens. We're not sort of boasting about any of this. I'm just giving you some additional context. Usually, like with the 9070 XTs, they throw them at us. They're like, do you want the white one as well? Like we get them all set, no dramas. This was crickets. Like people who we have good relationships with at these companies didn't really respond, didn't really say anything. I thought, well, it's a busy period at this time. I'll sort of wait. And we waited and didn't really, got a couple of emails back like, yeah, that sounds good. We'll let you know, which was a bit strange. And I was really confused as to why nobody had jumped at the opportunity. So I sent a few follow-up emails like, what's going on here? Would you guys like to be included? Please let me know as soon as possible. A couple of companies came back with we're not really looking at promoting the 5070 Ti at this point in time. Like, okay, well, I don't think the Super Series is coming anytime soon. So presumably you'll be selling these cards for at least the next, let's say, 6 months. But yeah, not a whole lot of interest. And then when I sort of asked Asus again, we really want to get the ball rolling on this content. We want to produce it as soon as possible. They're like, yeah, look, we're end of lifing those products. And so that was the first, what do you mean? So I went back to Asus and said, could you clarify, like, is it end of life for all 5070 Ti models, or is it just the Prime? Because I thought, maybe they just don't want to send the Prime, even though that's one of the few cards we do have. And they said, no, just to clarify, we 5070 Ti is end of life now. And so I said, what about other models? 5060 Ti, they said the 16 gigabyte model, that'll be end of life as well. And so it wasn't just, I think in your video, we said we sent 2 emails. I sent 4 emails clarifying this. So I got word back that the 5070 and the 5080 weren't entering end of life status. So they'd still be producing those. So if we were doing a roundup, they could provide sample of those cards. But 5070 Ti, they won't be providing samples because of that reason. So that's where we got with that. And then leading up to your video, we thought that information's interesting, but we've only heard that from them. But then it kind of supports why nobody else is interested in having this product promoted. So then we spoke to, other contacts in the industry, retailers and stuff like that. And they pretty much confirmed that, yeah, look, we've been briefed that 5070 Ti's in particular, but other models as well, will be extremely difficult to purchase moving forward. And it'll be price increase on top of price increase because of that. That really supported what we were hearing out of Asus. There's a little bit of other information in the background there that went into it. But essentially, Asus were telling us, and it wasn't like this person just shot me an email and then shot me another email and then shot me another email, like back to back. So when I really asked for clarification, they went away and it took multiple hours to get that clarification. So they weren't just making it up or whatever. I've heard other bizarre theories, which I suppose we'll get into at some point. But this really did seem like an internal communication, and they were relaying that information to us, which I don't know if they were meant to or not meant to do that. I think Asus were just like, yeah, we can't get them, so we're not making them. That's not a big deal, is it? And then it turns out that is a big deal. So that's pretty much what we got to. And then you made the video. One thing I would like to clear up straight away is quite a few people had concerns about the Asus employee that leaked that information to us, and that they were possibly being fired or reprimanded in some way or another. I just want to let people know that the team we spoke to and the employees involved saw no backlash. They didn't get into trouble. There was no sort of disciplinary action taken against them. Asus were pretty chill about it internally from what I've heard. So, because that was one of my concerns, like Tim and I don't want our contacts or anyone that gives us information on the record, if they've done that, if they're not lying, if that information's accurate, we don't want them to turn around because there was some sort of either Nvidia gets involved as the blowback or the community or whatever. We don't want that. We don't want that shitstorm landing on that person and then them blamed and either. Well, I don't think you could really get fired for that. That'd be unfair dismissal or whatever. There'd probably be some ramifications there, but you know what I mean? Like, we don't want their life made more difficult because they were just doing their job. Now, if it turns out that higher ups at Asus contacted us and said, look, this person just made this up, we have no evidence supporting what they've said, and we've spoken to them and they just thought that would be a good idea to say, okay, that's not doing your job well. But as far as I can understand it, based on everything we've heard from the higher ups at Asus who have got in contact with us directly, is that they've spun it off as a misunderstanding. The full information wasn't given, but then they're not saying that employee or that team did anything wrong either. So they're kind of like, it was a internal Asus whoopsie-doo. That's sort of how they've pitched it. Whereas me reading between the lines, it seems to me that Asus basically have looked at the supply issues and gone, well, moving forward, we might as well just place these products in end of life status. We don't want to support them or produce them ongoing, at least at this point in time. And that was just an internal memo. Like that was known to Asus. So don't bother sampling these products. Don't bother promoting them anymore. Don't spend money advertising them, because it's pretty important for everyone globally, all the different departments that handle advertising budgets and whatever around the world, to know which products that Asus actually want to promote in 2026. And if there's products that they don't plan on making, they don't want to spend money promoting them. So therefore, it would make sense that everyone's on the same page and they know about this. So if people who are looking at samples and they've been requested to get samples for a product and they've looked up like, oh, here's a product that we've now put in end of life status, we're not promoting it. And I guess at that point, that contacts then will how do I tell Hardware Unboxed? Am I like, we just don't have samples at this point in time, which is probably the usual response that we would get. We'd be like, oh, okay. And then we'd go and acquire them some other way. But they're just like, well, that's the reason. That seems reasonable enough. We're just not making them. So we'll go and tell them. So I think that's what's really happened. But anyway, just to let people know, there's been no backlash there for the team involved or any individuals at Asus. It seems like the company is pretty much on the same page that this was a decision they made and the employee was just relaying that message, but they probably should have been briefed to relay it to media in a different way. Like, you know, at this point in time, we're not looking at promoting this particular product or we don't have samples available. You're free to go and talk to other contacts, retailers, distributors, whatever, to try and get those. So yeah, there's obviously a lot more we can talk about, but is that a good summary for you, Tim?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. I mean, there's a few other things that obviously happened since the video that we should probably just quickly talk about as well. So all the information that you were sort of talking about was we gathered before publishing the video. After publishing the video, obviously there was a range of statements that were made, multiple different ones. Nvidia came out with one, Asus came out with multiple ones. And so essentially what happened was, now, I guess we should clarify that in the video, I was trying to convey that Asus had made their cards end of life. So in the main video part, and this is always the interesting thing about making videos like this, I thought I'd conveyed this in a clear way, in that I was saying Asus models such as Prime, Strix, you know, all those, they have made the internal decision at Asus to not manufacture those cards anymore. Therefore, within Asus, they're end of life. Now, I guess I probably didn't make that clear enough in the video because some people immediately thought that Asus was saying that Nvidia was saying that they're end of life.
Well, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but clearly it was the thumbnail and title that led people to believe that, which is fair enough. You know, put that in the title of clickbait if you want. But based on the additional research that we've done and the fact that Asus is the biggest partner, it's not like this was a tiny little partner. If they're killing it off and retailers are telling us they can't get any of any description, the next logical step is, well, it looks like, you know, this is a product that Nvidia is killing off, because if Asus has made the decision to kill it off because Nvidia can't supply them with enough of them and retailers tell us they can't get them in general. So that was sort of our opinion. But you've got to watch the video
Well,
to get the full brief on
yeah.
that.
Like, obviously, I think that the different language was used between the title and thumbnail and the body of the video. So in the title and thumbnail, we did not say Nvidia has made the card end of life. And so obviously the story that was run with was that Nvidia has said these cards are end of life, whereas the video said Asus has made their cards end of life, or at least, and again, I could have clarified that a bit better by making it clear that Asus internally had said that the cards are end of life. However, we also believe, based on all other factors, that this card is effectively being killed off, which is, again, why that was on the title and thumbnail. That wasn't just based on the Asus situation. It was based on all the things that we had discovered. And I still believe that I've changed the title and thumbnail now because of the clarifications and stuff that we've gotten. But originally, when the title said, the 5070 Ti is being killed off, I mean, that's still my understanding of the situation, my read on it, my take. Yep. So that's certainly that. But obviously the thing that people were running with beyond that was this whole, Nvidia has made this officially discontinued or officially end of life. So anyway, I just wanted to say.
The reason we were breaking the news is because it hadn't been officially announced. So we were trying to give people the heads up that if you do want a 5070 Ti, now is the time to grab one, because Asus has told us there will be no more from them. And if that's the case with them, likely others will be scaling back or just won't have them to produce them. So
it's not even likely. I mean, that's what retailers said.
Well, that's what retailers have said. Yes.
I think I don't want to get into specifics, but I think one of the retailers told me something along the lines of, we're going to get a shipment from an AIB, a non-Asus AIB, and that they're expecting that to be the last one, effectively. Like, they're getting that shipment in from that AIB, that distributor, and that's it for the 5070 Ti's from that brand.
And that's another thing that's worth talking about, as well as actual shipments and availability. So people are looking online at availability right now to see whether or not what you reported is accurate. But when Asus place a product at end of life status, we don't know when they made that decision for a start. So they could have made that in December. They could have made it during CES. We don't know. But without knowing that, all we know now is that they've told us that. But what's the lag time on when you actually won't be able to purchase those cards? It's not going to be instantly. They don't just turn the tap off and then all of a sudden you can't buy them. So they're still going out to distributors. Distributors are still distributing them to retailers. And then retailers have to sell them. And of course, the price still goes up with everything else. But it might be a month or two. I mean, in the US, the Asus cards are gone. They might get some resupplies, but if you go to PC Part Picker, type in Asus RTX 5070 Ti and start looking at the listings, you'll see that no one really has any. And that's been the case now for a few weeks. There's the odd spot of availability at well above MSRP pricing. But when I looked at the US stock situation and Canada, pretty much didn't exist. Whereas in Australia, they're still, I think the Asus cards are sort of largely sold out, but 5070 Ti's in general, there's still quite a lot of availability. I've spoken to retailers and distributors still have quite a few, but they noted that was all of that stock that's in Australia arrived in Q4. So, the US, for example, has like 13 times more people than Australia. So they're going to burn through whatever. Obviously, they get more stock as well because of that, but it's more likely that they'll burn through that fast than a much smaller continent like Australia. So where the lag time there again is going to be, longer than what we're seeing in the US to sell through our stock. But again, the distributors and retailers here are telling us that getting their hands on them is very difficult. They told us that before the video went live, and we've touched base with them since. They're like, yeah, that's still the same situation. And we're also expecting price increases. So we're actually being told, buy stock now because this is the best price that is you're projected to have access to for the foreseeable future, which means as bad as the situation is now, it is going to continue to worsen. So we're expecting multiple price increases throughout February, for example.
And that's for all GPUs is my understanding.
Yes.
So not just the 5070 Ti, which, I mean, obviously when a card is no longer being produced, then the price is going to go up for this supply that is filtering through in the last sort of little trickles. But yeah, we were sort of told that across all models, including the models like 5070s and stuff that are still expected to be produced, that the restocks will be, 10, 20, 30% more the next time around that they're getting in supply. And it's, again, like they don't get supply daily, for example. They're buying these cards up in bulk during waves as they're manufactured and shipped out. So that's what we're sort of saying, like, the current supply that you're seeing on store shelves in some regions is going to have been purchased potentially in Q4. And some retailers may just put up that price because they can, but it's not necessarily because they've restocked based on a current shipment or something. It's just they had that supply on hand, and then over time, as the restocks come in from distributors and the AIBs, the pricing is going up. So yeah, I mean, there's a few other things I wanted to, I guess, get into relating to this story. I think the first one is relating to Asus's clarifying statements and the sort of timeline that happened, which was quite amusing. So obviously, as I was sort of saying earlier, Nvidia made a statement, an official statement that they were always going to make, saying that these cards are still being supplied. Nvidia is never going to say otherwise, because suggesting something is discontinued and in their terms is very different to just not supplying something for a while. If you say something is discontinued, there's no chance it'll ever return. You're sort of making an official declaration that card is done, it's officially discontinued, etc. Whereas the current situation is more, the manufacturers can't make them because they're not being supplied, and hopefully that'll change at some point. But it's not currently discontinued. But the amusing things were that when Asus sort of came back to us a few times, and they did this through multiple different people, the first thing, which I think was quite telling, was that they didn't tell us that this statement they provided to us was wrong. They just said that Nvidia said it wasn't discontinued.
And that the important thing to note there is that if Nvidia didn't get involved, so they didn't reach out to Asus, we would have never got a clarifying statement, because the higher ups at Asus knew what we'd reported was accurate, and they knew that we hadn't been fed incorrect information, and they just were like, yep, Harbor Unboxers reported the situation. Like, they're not going to be doing any reviews of these cards from us because we're not making them anymore. Sort of end of story, move on. And I'm very confident that's how that would have played out. And we know for a fact that Asus contacted us about this, because they're like, Nvidia's contacted us about this, and they're saying that we have to sort of say this. Like, that was all made pretty clear to us when they originally reached out. So Nvidia was unhappy with the news. And as you've said, there's a few reasons for why Nvidia would be unhappy with that news. It's certainly not something they want to be made public. So Nvidia's basically told them, go fix this problem for us, because that's not the messaging that we want out there around the 5070 Ti, for example.
Yeah, that's right. So I think, I was expecting to hear from Nvidia and Asus, and so, I mean, no surprise that really happened. But I think the interesting thing was that, as you were sort of saying with the whole, was the Asus team disciplined internally or whatever for getting this wrong? If we get an official statement from Asus on the record from their PR team saying a GPU's been discontinued, but that information is categorically wrong, and higher ups, maybe the global PR person or whatever, is like, that's weird that they said that because that's not true, then they're going to contact us pretty soon. Like, I'd be expecting phone calls soon after the video is published or whatever. And there's not much like we could do about that, because we've got a statement from Asus PR saying that one thing, and then maybe a higher up gets involved and says another thing. Unfortunate scenario, etc. But if it was that level of wrong, that's what almost certainly would have happened, because when we publish things that, and sometimes it happens, we get something wrong, like a key fact wrong, someone will reach out quite quickly and be like, hey, you got that wrong. What actually happened was the first communication from Asus was very clearly saying, Nvidia is telling us this card is not end of life. Not, oh, sorry guys, we at Asus got that statement about our product wrong. It's that Nvidia is telling us this, and we need to tell you this.
So when we press them at basically saying, well, is the information wrong? Are you placing these products in end of life status or not? And they sort of couldn't answer that because then they were stuck behind a rock and a hard place. Like,
Yeah. So then another person reached out with a different statement that we published, the one that you would have seen, saying along the lines of they're consolidating their product lines, and that Nvidia is saying that this product is not end of life. So that is the sort of the next level of follow up that we got, and then this about an hour or two after that. So we published that statement because, again, that's another on the record communication from Asus. We're like, we'll give people the updates. What's going on? Nvidia's obviously made their statement. Asus is sort of coming in with their statements. Then Asus fully backtracks on what they said. They're basically like, no, we're not putting these into end of life status or discontinuing them. That is an official statement that you can see on their Asus website, where they're sort of, saying, I think they blamed it on incomplete information from certain PR representatives. That was the sort of statement that they had provided. And I mean, I guess an interesting thing that has come out is that both Nvidia and Asus are acknowledging officially on the record via these statements that there are supply issues. So they're not shying away from that necessarily, but they have, at least Asus has directly contradicted themselves through this. And so one of the things that I think I saw come up a lot from some of the criticism of the video was that, that Asus statement that we got at the end is the quote unquote official Asus statement, and that all the other communication that we had with Asus was sort of like secret chats. Like we were going and doing what we do at Computex and CS, where we sort of stand with these people in person and discuss some of these things. And usually those conversations are, they're not on the records. They're not for reporting. We're just sort of gathering information, or they're sort of more of a sort of like background anonymous type discussions. We've sort of made plenty of reports based on that type of information where, maybe we're, instead of speaking to a PR person, we're speaking to people from the divisions that actually make these products. Like when we're talking about motherboards,
To jump in, we won't say though that Asus said. We'll just say that this is what we've heard, like on the show.
Yeah, from industry sources.
Yeah.
And we'll go around and talk to obviously multiple different companies to get multiple different perspectives, because when you have sort of anonymous type sourcing, not on the record statements like that, you want to make sure that you're hearing the information from multiple people. I mean, this is standard stuff. Most people know how this works. But when you contact the PR representatives asking questions, these are on the record statements that can be attributed to Asus because they're PR statements. And anything that's off the record or anonymous, that's always decided upon beforehand, where you sort of say, I have some questions off the record, or the person you're speaking to will be like, so off the record, here's some information. Every other discussion with media is generally on the record unless otherwise specified. So especially with the PR representative, it's an on the record conversation. And so this wasn't like we're doing some industry research and sort of reaching out to sources and stuff like that. This was you asking our PR representative who represents Asus on the record questions about these products. And so the statement that was provided to us, they're official Asus statements. And yes, they published one of them later officially on their website. It doesn't make it too much of a difference whether it's on their website or it's a statement directly to us. The Nvidia statement that you saw was not published on Nvidia's website, but it was provided via PR representatives to media. And so exactly the same situation with the end of life direct quote from Asus. That was an official statement from an Asus PR representative.
And it's not someone that we just met or just took up the position. It's someone who's been in the role for multiple years. We've met multiple times. They've never, ever given us incorrect information. They're someone who really does their job well. They're on it. They're a very competent person. They're not making mistakes or messing things up. So it's someone we trust to get the information correct. But as we've said, we didn't just take their word for it. We went and actually spoke with a lot of other people. There was many phone calls made leading up to that video, whereas, I saw some criticism saying this is what happens when you rush things to be first, or you take the word of one person without doing proper research, which is a bit weird that people would say that because they're just admitting that they didn't do proper research because you explained the research that went into the video. You didn't sit there saying, we were on the phone for multiple hours. Steve was really chasing this up all day while we were piecing it together and spoke to different partners, retailers, distributors, and did all that sort of stuff. We're not just making this on a whim. But, you did say that we got this officially from Asus. It was confirmed multiple times. And we have spoken with retailers and confirmed that, this does look to be a real thing. So it's not Asus slipping up or making a mistake.
Well, I didn't believe it. Like
No.
when you messaged me being like Asus has said this, I'm like, okay, then sure. Like that doesn't sound right. And so yeah, obviously we need to get clarification from them. But then there's evidence of these things. Like you can sort of start piecing together whether or not Asus are telling the truth by again reaching out to people actually selling these products. Because if it is discontinued, then retailers can't purchase it. And then also just looking at retail supply of the models. And even before we made that video, and I know people have gotten upset that, we caused 5070 Ti's to become unavailable or go out of stock. But
did we? That's impressive.
Well, before the video though, like hours beforehand when I was putting together the video, you could not buy Asus 5070 Ti's. So that
was part of the research.
Yeah, that was part of the research. So it wasn't just like, oh, now we've made Asus cards out of stock. It was beforehand, you actually couldn't easily find them. And there was only a couple of models priced about $100 above MSRP at the time that we published the video. I think there was like on Newegg, maybe two, and I think I showed screenshots in the video, but there was like 2 or 3 listings of effectively the same MSI model, I think, and then a couple more that were even higher prices. So it was already dicey in terms of availability in the US. The Asus model's not really available. And then speaking directly to the distributors and retailers when they're sort of saying like, yeah, so that model we can't really get. It's sort of, if you get an official statement from Asus, you kind of have to take them on their word in a sense from companies say things that aren't necessarily true, but if we're not reporting necessarily that, Asus has said this, and then we're going to investigate whether Asus is lying or not. It was more just, it's interesting that Asus is saying this. Like they've made a statement saying this, and we want to cover Asus saying this. So that was sort of the thinking that went into it as well, I guess.
But if you stop and think logically about this. So let's say we released a video this afternoon that says the 9850X 3D has been cancelled. There's been production complications, and the 9800 X3D has also been cancelled. Let's say we ran with a story, the burning up issue that ASRock's had. They've found some sort of defect in the CPUs that they can't correct, and under certain circumstances they're exposed. So they're cancelling it. You will not be able to buy 9800 X3Ds once the current supply runs out. Let's just say we made that story up, okay? And it got picked up by multiple different outlets. People ran with it, and 9800 X3Ds pretty much sold out globally overnight because we were successful with that story, okay? How long until that's proven not to be the case simply through availability? Because that's the key here, right? How long will it take if they're constantly producing these, there's a constant production line of them, so they're coming out of the factory, they're going to the various places around their distributors. How long until another batch turns up? Like are we going to be sitting here for 3 months going, oh, wow, Harbour Unboxed made that video, and that's why 3 months later you can't buy a 9800 X3D? At that point, the story was probably right. So at the moment, we're not seeing 5070 Ti's available in mass. We're not seeing especially Asus models available. We're not seeing them anywhere near the MSRP. And while the price of everything's going up, the price of the 5070 Ti is going up much more rapidly relative to other products like, that have similar memory and stuff like that, although it is all going up. But if it was just the video that had created this temporary rush on 5070 Ti sales, what's a reasonable time frame that you would expect that if that story was fake or false or whatever, however you want to classify it, that things would return to what they were prior to the video?
Yeah, you'd expect within a couple of months that things would be more available. I mean, there's definitely different levels to it as well. Like there's no availability whatsoever. So the price just continues to go up, and the amount of models that you can buy dwindles away to nothing. Then there's sort of the, if pricing, like let's say, for example, the 9800 X3D situation, we lie about that product and it's out of stock. Now, I would expect that the next resupply, the very next resupply, probably going to be inflated in price because
Mhm.
all the models are suddenly in huge demand. And so that next batch is going to be expensive. But then over time, as sort of the demand and supply normalizes,
Mhm.
the price is going to drop back down. So for something like a 5070 Ti, I'd be expecting to see within a couple of weeks at least more models available. Now, they
Mhm.
may not be at the lower price, but
Mhm.
you know, some additional supply hitting the market at a certain price. And
Yep.
then within a couple more weeks, you'd see the price starting to come down to the level that they're actually selling them for. And then within like a couple of months sort of time frame, normal availability, maybe because of supply issues with memory, they're inflated above the MSRP, but they're available at a reasonable level
Mhm.
above the
Mhm.
price,
Yeah,
if you
sounds
know what I
reasonable.
mean.
Yep. That all sounds reasonable to me.
So yeah, I mean, it's currently too early to sort of tell, you know, whether in a few months you'll be able to purchase these GPUs, but I haven't seen evidence yet of resupplies of any sense. It seems just like the current supply that was available at retailers that they had purchased maybe months ago
Mhm.
is starting to dry up. And
Mhm.
another thing with these sort of stories, right, is that, we could just claim a 9800 X3D is not going to be available. And yeah, AMD is probably going to come out and say that's not true. But then people across all regions can easily reach out to their retailers, like I'm talking media here, and ask them things like, hey, so we heard the 9800 XG has been cancelled. Like, are you expecting supplies coming in? And they'll be like, I haven't heard anything about this. This is business as normal. Like, we're getting another shipment of those in a couple of weeks. And then you'd see that happen. And so it'd be disproven over the course of a couple of weeks via multiple angles, the actual supply and availability, discussions people would be having, statements and so forth. And it would just be obvious the situation. I think what's interesting with these sort of scenarios is you haven't really seen too many people, and this is a big story. Lots of people have been looking into it. You haven't seen too many people coming out and saying, well, I looked into this and I looked at the supply or the stock, or I spoke to retailers and found a different story. Like there was reporting even before we made our story about the 5070 Ti about how supply is more difficult now. Things are going to become more expensive. You can expect a bit of pain in the GPU market. And we were I think we made a few videos in November of last year, sort of warning people, hey, we're hearing from people that supply for these products is becoming more difficult. We're
Mhm.
expecting it to be bad. And so here's just your heads up, like, especially because in November of last year, a lot of products were at the MSRP. Now's a good time to buy because things are not looking great next year. And so, I think I was recently on the Moore's Law is Dead podcast, and I think Tom described it as sort of like an open secret. Like, it seems most people in the industry are aware of this happening. However, the companies are, I guess, even more so now, a bit hesitant to sort of say directly and clearly to people that that is the situation. But it seems pretty clear that everyone knows about this at this point, that supply for GPUs is a problem, and that will be the case for a little while.
Yeah, and going back to sort of the hypothetical situation I was giving a moment ago, we're talking about a product that's a year old now. So it's not some new product that, the 9800 X3D, for example, was difficult to buy because it was so popular and so in demand upon release. And that was true of a lot of the GPUs as well. But a year out from release, products like a 9800 X3D are easy to buy. They're readily available. They're available at or below the MSRP. You can just go buy one. So with an abundance of those CPUs, and I have spoken to retailers and they can order huge amounts of those parts, like all the Zen 5 processors, obviously the same on Intel's side. They're in massive quantities. So what's the likelihood? I know we are amazing influencers, Tim, and have a lot of power in this industry, a lot of influence. So it's like my Trump bit there. But what are the chances that we can make a video that just clears out all 9800 X3D inventory? That just wipes it out.
Yeah, it's pretty unlikely for a product that's a year old, and a lot of people that wanted it have already purchased it.
Yeah, so
Like,
if the
hard.
product's got healthy supply, everybody that's involved is making it or supporting it or whatever the situation may be. I think for us to to globally or close to globally sell it out or make it very difficult to find inside of 24 hours would be quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, but I
So
don't think we're that influential, but I guess maybe we have some.
we're either substantially more influential than we believe we are. We need to start charging a lot more for our ads, Tim, so make note of that. We'll pass that on to Balin. Or the 5070 Ti is having serious supply issues, and our video merely highlighted that fact. And, you know, yeah, it probably enticed some people to buy them. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't even really recommend a 5070 Ti above MSRP because the 9070 XT wasn't that. That was pretty close to MSRP when we broke the news on this. So why wouldn't you just be buying that product for considerably less money? Anyway, but I mean, that's the whole Radeon versus GeForce thing. Probably don't go down that rabbit hole on this.
I mean, I could imagine that there's sort of some people who are sort of were planning on buying one soon-ish, like they might have come into the money to do so.
Or they were waiting for a super, I guess. And
or waiting. And, you know, when we sort of made that video, there were some models that were sort of close-ish to the MSRP. So if you saw one for, say, you know, $830, which I think was the lowest price, and you sort of seen the news that this card is going to be hard to come by, and you're planning on buying it, I can understand that, you know, those lower models would sort of pretty quickly sell out because those people may, instead of buying in, let's say 2 weeks from now, they decide to buy right away. But I'm not expecting masses of people to suddenly be rushing out to spend like $1,000 on this GPU. Maybe scalpers and those sort of things, but like, yeah, most people that wanted us, like the thing for me, right, is that most people that wanted a 5070 Ti could have bought one for actually below the MSRP just a few months ago.
Yeah.
And so if you were thinking of, you know, that was a card that you were interested in, that was the time to do so. It was pretty unlikely. And I think it was pretty widely reported during that time as well that, you know, it isn't getting better than this.
Yeah, that's right. We warned people in multiple videos. Like I think I even said in my top 5 best GPUs, normally this time of year, we're like, just wait, guys. You know, there's this coming up or there's sales coming up. You know, now is not really probably going to be the best time to buy. Whereas we're like, we could actually firmly say, based on all the information we have, that now is the time to buy, which is usually the opposite, you know, to the advice we give at this time of year. But we're recommending if you want a GPU, you've been holding out for whatever reason, now is the time to strike. Do not wait. And it's very rare we say stuff like that.
Most people were saying it as well. So again, like the whole like we're not that influential. Yeah, I mean, maybe if you watch us, you'll get some information like that. But I think it was most people were saying this. Like within the sort of PC gaming industry, it was sort of understood that cards are MSRP now, and they're not expected to be MSRP in 2026. So by now, so yeah, I'm not expecting like tons of people to suddenly be interested in $1,000 5070 Ti's in early 2026 that didn't, for whatever reason, buy them slightly below the MSRP in like November. That would be a bit strange. I mean, you never know, but I'm not expecting there to be tons of those people. But at the end of the day, like the supply situation is what it is. And so eventually, even if we don't make the video that we make, if it is what we're saying it is, which is hard to come by, the current pricing that you're seeing now would have happened within a few weeks anyway, just because the lack of resupplies of that particular model would mean that the cheapest models over time just slowly become less and less available. So I'm not sitting here being like, oh, I'm so upset that people were sort of blaming us for that, because people seem to criticize reviewers for all sorts of pricing issues and things like that. That's just part of what happens. So I'm not like devastated about that. It's just
I miss the time when giving a product a positive review was the reviewer's fault for prices going up.
Yeah, that happened a fair bit, didn't it?
They were better times. Now when we tell you the prices are going to go up because they're going to go up, we get into trouble for that as well.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously we saw some comments on the video sort of saying like, you know, oh, you should retract this, and you know, this is obviously wrong now. I think you're on the same page with this. I've really no interest in doing that. I think the report is still accurate. The only complication now is obviously Asus saying two different things on the record. So one statement and then contradicting that statement later does make things a little bit more complicated. So, you know, we obviously said in the video that Asus said the cards were end of life, and then they went in afterwards and said that they're not. So people watching that video can't get, that more recent statement is not part of the video because we can't go and replace videos on YouTube. That's just the way the system works. But yeah, like in general, I still think that what is talked about in that video where 5070 Ti's are effectively killed is still accurate as far as I know now. Like more information obviously now afterwards, a week later, my understanding is that's still the case. So I mean, obviously there's people that are going to wholly believe the statements from companies that are being made. But I think, you can sort of see the evidence. There is evidence for these sorts of things in the market and at retail. So we'll see how that goes.
I guess, like you say, we'll just see how this plays out, really. I mean, you can argue back and forth all you want. There's obviously some arguments that are idiotic, like saying that we were deliberately lied to or that we're lying, because, I mean, I don't even feel like we need to discuss those or get into them because they're just pretty stupid to say. So we'll wait and see how that all plays out. I'm expecting that Asus probably aren't going to change their official internal, what I believe to be their official internal decision that they'd made, and that filtered through everyone, is that they were going to end of life those products due to the forecast availability. So I think in 3 months from now, buying an Asus card will be near on impossible. I don't think based on our video and all the backlash that they're going to reverse that and still, make them at least in good numbers or possibly at all. But anyway, we'll wait and see how that plays out. The only other information I have to follow up from all of this is obviously once Asus completely backflipped, and we had some private communications with them, which I can't really talk about. They're interesting, but they were more, I don't know, they didn't really say they were off the record, but essentially, I think Asus tried to patch things over with us as well, because I guess they were like, well, look, we told you a thing and now we're publicly saying a different thing, which is obviously going to annoy and upset you, but we're not saying you got it wrong or that you're at fault. It's just things happened. So it was a bit of a weird walk back to us as well privately, where they definitely didn't say we were wrong and they definitely didn't say we misunderstood them. They were basically like, yeah, look, we very clearly told you a thing and you went and clarified that with us, and we clearly told you that you were on the right path and all the information you got was correct, but we've messed up internally and we've crossed our wires and given you the wrong messaging. So that all sort of happened. And while that was happening, I said to them, well, since you gave us the wrong information and what we were led to believe is no longer the case, and you are producing 5070 Ti's, although you haven't said that outright, but you're now sort of saying that nothing's really changing, then I would like some 5070 Ti review samples, please, so we can go ahead with our roundup, because apparently this was a big misunderstanding and 5070 Ti's are still going to be produced. So that being the case, let's at least between us, forget all this happened, skip back, go back to our original request. Could we please now get some 5070 Ti review samples? And I was like, we'll speak to HQ and get back to you on that one. They're like some pause.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was just over a week. It was basically a week ago now. I think it was 8 days ago we had that conversation, and I have had exactly no updates on that. Which, now what's quite funny is other partners like MSI and Gigabyte, they've gone from quiet to not really cooperating or wanting to be involved to reaching out and being like, hey, you wanted those cards? Would you like all of them? So it seems like I'm doing a 5070 Ti roundup with at least Gigabyte and MSI cards at this point in time. And I'll have one Asus card because I've already got one. But Asus now, I don't know where they're at. So they didn't say no, they didn't say yes. They sort of were like, we'll get back to you on that one. So
yeah, a roundup of an unavailable GPU is going to be very, very funny.
I'll be investing time and energy into that one now because Gigabyte and MSI sending cards. So I don't know how useful this is going to be for people, but it's going to be a side project for us that we'll be working on over the coming probably months. And by the time I do get all the cards in and get all the testing done, it probably will be like a March release based on just how these things come together, because it is quite a lot of work, and not only to test them, but just get them all. And normally I would go and purchase or borrow the cards we can't get. I don't know how easy that's going to be. But anyway, so that's where we're at. So Asus isn't end of lifing it now, according to them, but they also don't have any.
Just going back a brief moment there, I think when Asus, contradicted themselves with this statement and sort of made another, basically walk back their original claims to us, like I was annoyed because obviously we'd published a video with different information in it. And I want the videos to be accurate. Like when I publish something on the channel, I want because it's useful information for people, that video is useful information for people, I want it to be as accurate as possible. So having the company backflip and sort of say later, oh, we're not end of lifing this, when originally we were told that it was, in some sense it does make us look a bit silly. And so that was annoying. But I'm not like losing sleep over it or anything. I'm just like, that's a frustrating part of doing this sort of thing. If a company comes out, makes one statement and then changes the statement later, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. It's just the way things are. And I certainly, my interpretation of everything that I've heard from Asus is, it seems more like Nvidia was interested in clarifying the statement. Like they were the party that were the most interested in clarifying what was being said. So,
and you or I, one of us, I can't remember when we had the conversation as the video was going live, accurately predicted how this would play out. Like
I said Asus would definitely have to backtrack at some point
because of pressure by Nvidia saying that this isn't a thing. Like we knew that it was going to play out that way. And I think other media that are a bit more experienced or, have been around for a while and seen how these things play and have some insight into these communications and how things play. Really do like I was listening just before this to a podcast style video from Digital Foundry on the main channel. And the boys over there were talking about it. And they did a really good job, worth watching, getting their opinion on it. Alex spoke quite extensively, and they know what's going on here. I think they have a pretty accurate read on how this played out and where the truth lies. And other guys like Daniel Owen, who always do good reporting, he covered this at length as well, and it's pretty hard to pull the wool over his eyes. And I think he did a really good job of explaining to his audience what's likely going on. So there have been some really good follow-up reports as well from people who, the usual suspects who do a good job on this sort of stuff. But I thought, they're the two I recall watching. There's certainly others, but Daniel Owen and Digital Foundry, I think, did a really good job of talking about this and doing some further digging.
I think the final thing that I wanted to touch on is that the whole situation is a little silly, in my opinion. I don't really understand. Well, I do to some degree, because companies don't want to damage their reputation to some level, but I don't really understand the secrecy around the GPU supply. Like, if cards are not being manufactured, there's supply issues, I don't really know why companies need to come out and sort of claim otherwise. Like Nvidia was sort of trying to say, there are supply issues, but like, we're still supplying these cards to the AIBs. It's like, yeah, but are you? And then Asus sort of coming out and saying, there's supply issues, but like, we're not discontinuing end of life in these products. What is the problem with coming out and sort of saying, yeah, guys, like a 5070 Ti is going to be hard to buy. Like there's the supply of this has been really severely impacted by whatever reasons. And we're just not able to make this car. I don't understand why this is a controversial statement for a company to make. Updating consumers about whether the products they're making, they can actually buy them or not, should just be routine information.
I think it would be if it was really out of their control, because let's be honest, this entire problem has been largely created by Nvidia. And this whole AI bubble is what we like to call it. People get upset when we say that, but I mean, I don't know how you view it any other way. They're not prioritizing gamers. They're not prioritizing the people who got them to where they are now. And so I think if you look at Nvidia over the past year, and when I say Nvidia, I really mean GeForce, it's largely been damage control. Pretty much everything they've done, especially like the PR team, in my opinion, has been damage control. From the way they handled the repeat of 8GB graphics cards, that was 100% damage control from start to finish. Like, not sampling them, not announcing them correctly, trying to cover them up, trying to use trade shows to launch them so that they wouldn't get the coverage. And, all of that stuff's played out. And I think with this, it's a classic, NVIDIA GeForce thing where they want to have their cake and eat it too. So they want to be able to maximize margins and abandon gamers at this point in time because it makes the most sense for them to do that financially, but they don't want gamers to feel like they're being abandoned. They want to blame other things. And when it becomes clear that you can't buy a 5070 Ti anymore and prices are just astronomical, Nvidia want to be able to play victim in that and be like, well, it's memory prices. We don't have control over the VRAM prices. That's, availability has become very difficult there. As a result, pricing's gone crazy. We've offset, and we've even heard what crap did they feed to? Who was it? I don't want to say, I thought it might have been Tom's Hardware, but I shouldn't say that because I don't remember. Where they've been eating the cost on the memory.
Oh, I think that was WCCF Tech.
Oh, yeah. Man, that was an embarrassing report, seriously. But that is the narrative that they want to have out there, that NVIDIA is doing the best by the gamers that they can, but, NVIDIA can only do so much, and they're not making any decisions that negatively impact gamers because, well, people will be like, but they don't care about gamers anymore, True at this point in time, but do they not care anymore? How many billions do they make off gamers? And how long is this AI money train going to run for before it just all implodes in on itself and then they have to fall back on selling things to gamers?
Well, that point is obviously a massive topic that we could talk about in a future podcast.
Definitely.
But I think, GeForce is, I think it's in the realm of $3 to $4 billion a quarter still, which is obviously a massive business. The thing I definitely get what you're saying. I feel like NVIDIA can still blame external, like even if the truth is that NVIDIA is to blame, they can still attempt to blame external factors, but they're not even really doing that. They're just sort of still saying, there's a few supply issues, but like we're still supplying these cards. I don't really see what the issue would be with coming out and sort of saying, well, yeah, like we can't. Have you seen the reports on memory prices? SK Hynix and Micron are effing us, so we now can't make a 5070 Ti for you.
Yeah,
like they could say that if they wanted to.
They can say that, and that's what they want to say. But if the truth is they're just not making them anymore, like they're not producing them anymore because they don't want to pair the memory with them, the memory they have available, they don't want to pair with them. It is a different story. The narrative shifts then, like if they've officially ended life because the margins are no longer what they want them to be and they'd rather pair the memory with products they can make larger margins on, that is a different thing to, we're still making these cards, we have an inventory of them, we want to ship them to gamers, but we can't get the memory to do it. It is a bit different. It's a bit different than just abandoning it altogether and putting it in end of life status. And I think that was the problem they had, was that language there, the end of life status that Asus used to us. They don't want their partners saying they've, basically ended this product indefinitely because they can't get enough of them. They want to leave it that we're working to get these in the hands. The usual lines. It'll be like demand, and they might not even. Would they have even admitted the memory thing though, Tim, if it wasn't for our video, or would they have just stuck to the usual BS that they've been using since day one? That the narrative would have been, guys, our products are just too good. You guys are just buying them too much. The demand's too high. We're doing our best to produce them. But
that's a good one. They've used that a fair bit.
That's what they were definitely going to do. They were going to say that we're too good. Our products are too good. You guys like them too much. We're doing our best to produce them, but they're just in such high demand that it's allowing people to scalp and do this and that. But we're the good guys here. We're just, victims of our own success. We're trying to produce more. We're ramping up production. We're doing this. We're doing that, whatever. I mean, they wouldn't have even gone into that detail. They would have really just said it's because GeForce is so amazing and the demand's so high, because that's what they've
Well, they did
said.
also say that in the statement.
Yeah.
They did say the demand for GeForce GPUs is really high or something.
Yeah, they, without the video or any other information, like without, really Asus kind of screwed them here. Without Asus saying that, they would have stuck to that. They wouldn't have talked about, they might have said there's some challenges here and there or whatever. I mean, they probably wouldn't have even really made a statement on it. It would have just been, they wouldn't have made an official statement, and they technically didn't, as you said this time. Like, it wasn't something they published on their website or the news section. It would have just been when media like us or anyone else reached out and said, why 5070 Ti is so hard to buy right now? We want to inform our audience. They would have given you the usual PR spiel. Yeah, look, we were aware of the constraints and we're trying to get them in the hands of gamers, but we're working to get them in the hands of gamers. They're just so popular that we're struggling to meet demand on this year-plus old product. It would have been something along those lines. They would have controlled the narrative a lot better, or at least attempted to.
Yeah. Oh, look, I 100% agree that is what they would attempt to do. I just find it funny that in this industry, there's just, that is the first port of call for all companies, is that they immediately go to, let's just say it's demand stuff instead of, but there's nothing really wrong. Like, and this is the thing, obviously Asus backtracked and all that sort of thing. There's nothing really wrong with Asus saying we can't make 5070 Ti's. Like, there's no, that shouldn't be a, oops, we sort of let the secret slip out on that one. It should just be an honest answer to a question.
Well, it was for Asus, and it wasn't a problem for Asus because they're not the ones that are constraining the supply. They're they're the first ones that are being supply constrained.
Mm-hmm.
But if Asus made the product, right, like their portable gaming handheld or whatever, and that was in demand, people liked it, and they had like 3 different models. And the 2 cheaper models were super popular, but they wanted to sell a higher end model. They had a complete monopoly on it. They're like, well, stop selling these ones. We'll just make this where people have to spend more money. And they just end of life the 2 cheap models for whatever reason they want to give. But ultimately, the reason is to push you to the higher margin product, because they couldn't easily supply all of them or whatever the situation may be. But I really think that's what's going on here. And whether it's the GeForce arm of Nvidia fighting to remain relevant in this sort of, this current climate, or the company being very well aware that this AI boom thing could be a temporary situation and that they will have to start making money selling gaming graphics cards again at some point. Because as you said, we could dedicate a whole podcast to that. We'd probably have to do a bit of research, but I know there's a lot of companies now that aren't using GeForce GPUs, like Google, for example, of producing their own TPUs for that. So if more and more, especially major companies, start doing that, and it's like the AI boom, like all of these booms, there's lots of little startups and people involved, and then as time goes on, it becomes like the more monopoly, duopoly type situation where all the small startups can't compete, and then it's just Google and Microsoft doing it, for example, and then maybe neither of them even use NVIDIA hardware. And then where does that leave NVIDIA? They're just selling to, professionals and gamers again or something like that. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, you're probably, the market that got you there and is still a multi-billion-dollar market, you probably don't want to go pissing them off too much when you do have some competition there that's probably, I think fair to say, the most competition you've seen in a very, very long time. So they're trying to balance all of that.
Yeah, I do find it, again, sort of on the same angle of funniness as companies' inability to just tell the story straight, is sort of, you get NVIDIA coming out at CES and having these big press conferences, a supposed consumer show where they're sort of saying how great AI is, and we can use AI for all these applications and it's transforming the world and robotics and blah, blah, blah. And they're sort of saying all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, on the one hand, they're claiming that, but on the other hand, they can't then admit to gamers that AI is more important. It's like, if you're saying it's so important and that's the legitimate, like, that is it's well understood now that is the reason why gaming GPUs are becoming more expensive, is because of AI hardware demand. So if you're coming out on stage and you're sort of saying, look at this AI thing, how good is this? This is transforming the world. then you do have a reason to give to gamers as to why they can't buy gaming GPUs. And the reason is AI is more important and better.
Yeah,
And
that's not the reason they want to give gamers.
No, but the thing is, though, is that if as a company you genuinely believe that statement, you should be able to sell that to the gamers. Because if you actually do believe for real that AI is a transformative, life-changing technology, then that is more important than gaming. Like if it is actually going to impact all areas of our lives and make everything better for us across everything, right? Which is basically what the companies are claiming, then gamers should easily be able to take that message because improving all areas of life is better than gaming.
Yeah, I think we know the truth on that one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though, is that like, if you're coming out on stage and saying all that stuff, and then secretly in the background, you're like terrified to admit to gamers that AI is the reason you can't buy gaming GPUs, there's a pretty big disconnect there because you should just be able to come out and say to gamers, sorry, we're not prioritizing gaming GPUs because we're trying to transform everyone's lives. Sorry, everyone, that you can't get those gaming GPUs. We were just trying to make your life better, right? So that is the sort of massive disconnect that causes, I think, this sort of lack of honesty and transparency. Is that they kind of, I don't know whether it's because they don't truly believe that or they don't fully believe it or whatever, but they know gamers are not going to accept that message. And so they can't say that, can they?
No, they found a temporary, well, I shouldn't say, no, they found a temporary loophole to print money and they're taking full advantage of it. And it's all going to come unstuck in probably the not too distant future would be my prediction. This is just my opinion, far from an expert on all of this. It's just my, let's say, ill-informed opinion on the whole situation. But, you know, we're hearing reports that OpenAI are pretty much screwed. They're not going to be able to meet the revenue targets that they need to hit over the next few years, and they could be out of money before long. If OpenAI goes, that is the first card to fall in this house of cards, and it's going to come tumbling down a big way. And I don't really know what happens after that, but it's going to be some kind of disaster, and that'll be reflected
putting ads
in
the product. I don't really follow this too closely, and again, I'd have to do more research for a separate podcast topic on it. But I heard that they were putting ads in the product or something now, which is
they just can't.
A sign things aren't going well.
Well, as I understand it, and look, don't take my word for this, guys. This is just Tim and I having a discussion about it. Obviously, it's not our area of expertise or of particular interest, really. But as I understand it, it's becoming increasingly more costly to improve upon where they're currently at. And they're sort of running into the same wall that we've kind of hit with graphics cards for gaming, is that there was this huge initial boom where progress was being made and chatbots were getting impressive. And, you know, even the latest ChatGPT, they had to walk that one back because it was less impressive than the previous version. And as far as I can tell, they've kind of hit this brick wall on where they can go with the current level of technology. It's becoming increasingly difficult to improve these models. So we're going
to get so many comments from AI truther people or whatever.
Yeah, well, they had these predictions where it was like this accelerated exponential growth that AI was going to go through by 2026 and through 2026, and it hasn't really happened. And it's, you know, it hasn't grown anywhere near where it needed to, and they've starting to hit a brick wall. So I don't know. We'll see where all this goes, but it seems like this year is going to be a very interesting year, and maybe not for the reasons we initially thought it was going to be. And if the writing's on the wall now, if indeed it is, then Nvidia is going to they're going to want to be very careful with how they manage their bread and butter and what got them to, you know, the point where they could take advantage of this whole AI thing.
I agree. I think my sort of position is, to some degree, I can understand the trying to massage gamers. I also do think, though, that gamers appreciate honesty. And while it would be disappointing news to hear that graphics cards are not going to be available, I think gamers are frustrated in a sense with companies making claims that are obviously not 100% accurate when they could just say, like, do you think gamers would be annoyed, like long term, sort of really very annoyed, if Nvidia came out and sort of said, "Look, sorry guys, but you know we're supply constrained and we're not going to be able to supply as many GPUs as we would have liked." Like, a gamer's going to be outraged, or are they going to be like, I do appreciate Nvidia sort of telling me the current lay of the land, the current landscape. Yes, they're sort of saying this, but because right now they're making statements that are then not really what is happening as far as we understand it to. And so isn't that going to make gamers more annoyed if, Nvidia is coming out and saying, we're still supplying GPUs, but then you go to a retailer and you can't buy the GPU? Like, wouldn't it have just been better to be honest with them and be like, well, so like we tried, but like, sorry, we couldn't.
That's a hard question to answer because it's difficult because I have a lot of friends that are PC gamers and a lot of them won't even know about this or care. They just want to buy the graphics card and they'll be like, oh, why is the graphics card expensive, or why can't I buy it? And they might ask me, or they might do a bit of a Google search, or they might, but yeah, how much gamers actually do care about this stuff? It's I don't know, it's a difficult one to answer. As far as like hardware nerds like us and other people that follow this, we'll get invested in it and have opinions on it. But gamers at large, I don't know. But I mean, we know for a fact, looking at our audience, 30,000 people voted on the poll, and 93% of the people voted this is damage control. And then 7% voted that we were given incorrect information. So based on that, I guess 7% of people bought what we believe to be BS from Nvidia and Asus, but the overwhelming majority share similar opinions to us on this whole thing. So their damage control, but again, and it's like, if this was the first time something like this had happened, like Nvidia was pretty truthful with their presentations, they didn't lie to you, using stuff like frame generation to bullshit gamers, and they were a pretty honest and open, company that had people kind of like, the early days of Ryzen, where you had your Robert Hallex and stuff in r/AMD, taking feedback and being pretty frank with gamers. I think if that was the situation with Nvidia, that poll would have come out very differently. But I think it's kind of par for the course now. Like, gamers are used to Nvidia just flat out lying about stuff, which is annoying because they have great products and they have great technologies. But telling gamers that a 5070 is going to equal 4090 in terms of gaming performance and stuff like that, you're really, they're starting to lose the messaging on stuff like that, which is why polls turn out in, the way they have. So, and like I said to you, like my opinion was 2025 was largely Nvidia in GeForce. It was largely GeForce on damage control. That's what they spent most of 2025 doing, I felt. I don't know if you felt differently about that, but that was kind of my read on things throughout most of the year that they were.
Yeah, I think with the PR team, certainly, I find it, I guess, a bit sad for the engineers that work there, because you have people developing technologies like, the latest DLSS 4.5 and G-Sync Pulsar and stuff. And, you meet some of these people at CES and Computex and places like that. And I'm talking not the PR people, but like the product managers, the people that have made these technologies. And they're genuinely very passionate about gaming. They want to improve gaming for people. They're coming up with interesting and innovative features for people, and they want, their product that has been probably their life's work over the course of many, many years to sort of come to fruition and improve things for gamers. And then there's that. And then meanwhile, the company at large is sort of, not supplying graphics cards, making it difficult for people to buy them, doing blunders like 8 gigabyte of VRAM for too many products and all these sorts of things. And I mean, I don't know how those employees feel about that situation, but I do feel a bit sad for the people who are genuinely creating these great technologies at these companies, who then have to, look at all this feedback of what people think of Nvidia from gamers. And there's a lot of negative sentiment because they use things like frame generation to mislead people about the performance of products. And, they're trying to claim cards are being made when they're not, and things like that. So yeah, that's always been something, yeah, that's a bit annoying about them as a company. But you know, is the PR team doing damage control for a lot of these things? I mean, yeah, basically yes.
And to circle back with what you were saying about, if they really do believe in the whole AI thing, they wouldn't need to, do this damage control or backtrack or whatever the situation is. And recently you've had Nvidia's CEO, Microsoft CEO, they've been trying to convince the public that AI is brilliant and that they should be excited about it and there shouldn't be the term AI slop. And they're really going into what appears to me to be desperation mode, where this hasn't been accepted well from the public. Things aren't going as well as they hope they were going. Perhaps the writing is on the wall and they're seeing it, and they're now trying to convince, in a desperate sort of last-ditch desperate act to convince people, no, AI is amazing, you've got to get on board with it. So we are seeing that happen. It's playing out in real time now, where the CEOs, which are the head of the marketing arm, that's really what they're doing. They're marketing the company, and they're gaslighting everyone even further now, convincing them that they need to be excited about AI and start using it in their life for useful things and stuff. But so that's all interesting. That's definitely going on. And I think back to, which was the Computex? How many years ago was it now? Was it 2024 or was it 2023 when we were starting to have conversations with higher ups at companies about AI, and they were all freaking out about it and getting excited? And I can't remember what year.
It was a couple of years ago, I think, when we sort of started to see products with AI in the name that didn't have AI in them. And then I think we got asked by a few companies our thoughts on AI and whether we were using it and stuff like that.
That's exactly what I was about to bring up. So I can't look, let's say 2 years ago, guys. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 years ago, but when the AI thing started to become a thing and people didn't really understand it or know what it was going to be used for, and we started seeing AI-powered SSDs, like Tim just said, we went and we had a meeting with someone, and they were all amped up and excited about AI because it was going to help sell products in their view, I guess. But they didn't really seem to know why they were excited about AI. It's just that it was something to be excited about. And they asked Tim and myself, are we excited about AI? What are we going to use it for? What do we think about it? And they were basically saying, I'm excited about this. This is very exciting. This is awesome. There's lots of hype and it's going to make us lots of money. And it's going to be great and do all these things, but I can't really articulate what those things will be. It's just, I'm excited. And so they wanted us to fill in the gaps. Like, why is it exciting, Tim and Steve? Tell us what you think of AI and why it's going to be great. And we were sort of sitting there going, well, at this point in time, while we're not saying AI won't be the future, it's kind of like the ray tracing quote. Our opinion really is that it's highly speculative, all the investment at this point in time. We don't really know how people are going to make money from it. It's obviously something that needs to be developed and worked on because, there can be some really positive outcomes from it. But, as far as that goes, it just seems like all the investment, the money being thrown around is, I guess, highly speculative. That was pretty much our summary, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we were being asked questions like, how's this going to improve lives for gamers and stuff like that? And it's like, well, I don't really know. We're going to have to see where those products end up.
That's right. We envision some future at some point where perhaps games, like the AI in games, is actually intelligent and can do things like, you can have different playthrough of games. And we've seen demos of that. So I guess, we're not saying AI is garbage and shouldn't be developed and shouldn't be used. Like, having these tools can clearly make story-driven games far more engaging and unique, certainly in the outcome of the game. But we're not there yet. It wouldn't be, if I was in charge of spending billions of dollars, it wouldn't be something I'd be throwing billions of dollars at to get a return in the next few years.
Well, I think one of the issues that a lot of, going back to the CEOs whinging about people saying it's AI slop, right, is that Yeah, and there'll be comments on this podcast because we talk about AI and stuff, being like, you don't understand the technology. It is useful for X, Y, Z reasons, coding, whatever. I don't doubt that's true. That it does have some use cases. It is interesting to use for certain things in those fields. But the problem, and I think why a lot of people are calling it AI slop now, is that everything is being labeled AI. Like absolutely everything.
Well, there is a lot of AI
has
slop as well, though. Like there's
well,
a lot
that's
of
but the AI slop comes from the fact that AI slop doesn't apply to the useful applications. It's how it's sort of marketed to talk about all these things that it can do, but it does poorly. So things like, AI slop images, that's because they say you can do all this image generation, then people use it, and a lot of the output is bad. So they're like, it's AI slop. Same with all sorts of other things that it can do. And so that's why it's got those sorts of names. Like, Microsoft, my favorite company, integrates Copilot throughout Windows. And then they're like, look at all these things Copilot can do. And it's like, either the things aren't particularly useful or they just don't work very well. And so then it gets labeled as AI slop. That's not discounting that AI has some use cases in some fields and has transformed those. And long term, it's going to be a great application for those fields. It's that, like with cryptocurrency and blockchain and metaverse and all those things that have come before it, right? During this period, you get all these companies saying things like, this will transform absolutely everything. Like, this is going to be awesome for all of society across all areas. And then people start actually using it and they're like, look, you guys said this would be awesome for XYZ applications. I used it for that and it sucked. And so then you get the AI slop feedback.
Yeah, and there's definitely some examples where it does work well. But, you and I are pretty heavily entrenched in this whole tech thing. We live and breathe it. So if you and I are sitting here after all these years of being gaslit about how amazing AI is and what it's going to do for us, and we're sort of sitting here going, even for our work, the uses for it are extremely limited, and even sometimes it's easier just not to use it. Sometimes you get a great outcome. Sometimes you waste a lot of time and get led down the wrong path. So this is why the CEOs are coming out trying to convince people that it isn't, the reality isn't what you perceive it to be. You've got it wrong somehow. Everything you've learnt and understood to this point in time, you're not getting it. And that makes sense, right? Like, you and I are sitting here and we really struggle, like, especially in our workload, like, how useful is AI to this point in time? Like, how much can we actually use it? I've played around with it because, it's not something I would say we would ever use anyway, just because I like doing my job. So I'd like to do my job, I guess is probably the best way to put it. But there are some aspects of my job that if I could optimize and make more efficient, then sure, okay. But I've messed around with it and just tried basic things like, what are the specs of the 9070 XT? How many cores does it have? This and that. And sometimes I'll ask it that and it will actually get everything right. Other times I'll ask it and it'll get almost everything wrong. And then sometimes when it gets everything wrong, I'll ask it again and it gets it more wrong. And then I'll ask it again and it gets it right. It's like it's just randomly guessing information, pulling it. Like, and there's no consensus on, how many cores a 9070 XT has, and it'll give you the correct answer every time, no matter what context you put it in. So if you've got to go fact check all of that anyway, using it to summarize or something, it's just, it's not terribly helpful. And I know on the coding side of things, they have people now that are specialists in dissecting AI generated code. So essentially they give them the lump of code and they go through it and just fix it all up and optimize it and get it working. And that, I guess, if you're a specialist at that, makes the whole process quicker. I don't know. But getting back to the original point that I was working towards, after all this time, you and I are still sitting here after billions, if not trillions of dollars have been spent on this AI thing. And we're like, yeah, like it's okay, I guess. It can do some pretty cool things, but it's not going to transform our lives in the way that it's been pitched to. Like, you can occasionally make a cool image with it or something. And yeah, like, I don't want to downplay it. Like, it is impressive. It can do some great stuff, but it's it's really like the ray tracing and DLSS thing that we were sold initially. Like DLSS was going to do all this amazing stuff, and it's sort of starting to get there now. Less sold on ray tracing. The future of gaming, ray tracing, like
yeah. Still doesn't seem to be in every game and stuff like that. It's been a long path, but I mean, yeah, those technologies are sold in a certain way to build hype, and AI is very similar. I mean, I know we're going to get comments saying like, but projections of things, this will get better and it'll be accurate soon and stuff like that. I mean, based on my personal use of doing things like research, like you've sort of said, I don't think the accuracy is all that different compared to when I first tested it a few
it will
years
get
ago.
better though, right?
I'm sure it will, but like, what are we talking? Pretty slow progress?
Well, how many billions of dollars do you have to spend to get it to a point where it's going to be useful for you? And who's going to spend those billions of dollars? Like,
yeah, that's right. I mean, I was using it for just the other day. I was like, trying to find all the monitors for a certain roundup of a specific spec. And I was like, Googling has taken me this far. I'll just check with, AI tools to see whether it can, find me some more options and, put in the specs, find all the monitors that use this. And it just, gives me model names that I know for a fact and not that specification. So, and this was an issue obviously a while ago as well. So yeah, that's sort of my position on it. But I mean, we've gotten fully off track now compared to
we have
Nvidia cancelling 5070 Ti's.
But this comes back to what I was sort of saying originally about Nvidia and wanting to keep gamers happy, because OpenAI, like ChatGPT, it's not that great now. Like Google's Gemini, in my opinion, is a much more impressive AI. It does images better. It does research better. I think it's just outright better. And they're not using NVIDIA GPUs for that. So you could argue the best AI on the planet isn't using NVIDIA GPUs. It's using Google's own in-house designed TPUs. So is that a problem for NVIDIA? I don't know. Like, and again, I'm not an expert on this. I don't fully understand it. If I'm getting some of this information wrong, then feel free to correct us in the comment section. But
we should probably do an AI podcast, because there's a lot of other things to talk about. Things like, how memory is obviously in significant demand, but memory manufacturers are not like tripping over themselves to increase supply and all these sorts of things. But when we go for an hour and a half now, so I think we're probably towards the end of our discussion. I mean, there's not really much more to talk about when it comes to the supply issue with NVIDIA's GPUs. It is what it is. People will be able to see the evidence of supply in the market. You'll be able to look at your retails and see what the situation is. And that will sort of prove whether what we've said is accurate or not. It's kind of over to that now. I have seen some reports suggesting that all NVIDIA GPUs, the supply of them has been turned off. That's not necessarily what we've been hearing. It sounds like some models are still being manufactured at AIBs, and retailers, especially for the lower tier cards, still believe they'll be able to purchase things like RTX 5060 Ti 8 gigabytes relatively easily.
Well, Asus confirmed directly to us when we were going through all of this that the 5060 8 gigabyte, the 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte, the 5070 and the 5080 were not end of life. We didn't ask about the 5090. We didn't bother. So,
well, they're $4,000 now. Do gamers care about the 5090 now? Probably not. Like,
that's why I didn't.
Not a gaming
asking.
card.
But yeah, so just to clarify, when we specifically asked them about those products, they said they weren't in end of life status. Just the 16 gigabyte 5060 Ti and the 5070 Ti.
So yeah, we'll see how that goes with supply and stuff. I think, it's going to be a very challenging year for building gaming PCs. I hope a lot of people have already got the gaming GPUs that they need for the next little bit, because supply does seem to be pretty dire. So we'll see what's happening across the entire market, like where 5070s and things like that are going to go. But
if you want a 5070, if you want a 9070 XT, like talking about buying a GPU right now, 9070 XT, 9060 XT, 16 gigabyte, they've already gone up in price. They're about $100 US over MSRP. My advice would be get one of those now, because short of the AI bubble bursting and that all going up, going badly, let's say, if things continue the way they're projected to by all the companies that give the projections, that are heavily invested in this, they're talking, 1 to 2 years before things start to calm down. So if that's true, you'll be waiting a while, because all of the information we have received is that the prices are going to keep going up. So your $700 9070 XT now could be $1,000 before we know it. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but it's going to be more expensive than it is now in a month from now, based on the information we do have.
Yeah, you can go back and watch a video that we made on Hardware Unboxed last year where we sort of broke down the BOM costs of some of these products and sort of looked at how memory prices would affect the final retail price. And basically that some of that is playing out now with sort of, if GDDR memory doubled in price, it was going to cause a $50 to $100 increase across most of the lineup. If it triples, it'll have more of an impact. So you can see a lot of that in that video, which does explain, outside of, if companies like Nvidia decide not to supply 5070 Ti's, it's a different scenario. But as far as for products that are still being manufactured, you can see the impacts in that sort of video, and that is starting to play out now. So yeah, we'll try to keep people informed with things like, talking to AIBs and distributors and retailers throughout this year to sort of see whether the situation is improving. We'll keep people updated on that. But yeah, everything that we're hearing is each resupply is going to be more expensive than the last. And so, yeah, things are not amazing in that sense. But yeah, I think that'll pretty much do it for this episode. We'll get back to boring life perhaps in a future podcast, probably next week, when things aren't as exciting to talk about with actual hardware stuff. Obviously, we haven't done a podcast for a month. So yeah, fair bit of stuff to get through with this whole GPU supply situation. But we'll be back next week to talk about more things. So thanks for listening. If you want to become a supporter of Hardware Unboxed on Patreon, you get access to the ad-free version of this podcast feed and a few other benefits like our Discord chat and other things. We'll probably be doing a monthly live stream pretty soon as well. So if you're interested in that, that's available for Patreon members. But until next week, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.